Warning! Warning! The following video is intended for educational and entertainment use only. The content will include disturbing images, violent scenarios, and explicit language. This video is intended for 18 plus and older audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
March 21st, 1980, at around 10:30 p.m., Angelo Bruno was sitting in the front passenger seat of a Chevy Caprice being driven by a young Sicilian-born mobster associate named John Stanford. Bruno's normal driver, his trusted aide, Raymond Long John Mortara, had conspicuously made himself unavailable at a short time earlier when it came to driving the Don home from a dinner meeting with the subordinates at a popular South Philadelphia restaurant named Cousin's Little Italy, which was owned by one of Bruno's capos, Frank Sindone, and he previously had been at the site of Piccolo's 500 Club, which had been owned by Nicky Scarfo's uncles, the Piccolo brothers. Over the last few months, Sindone, who was known as the Barracuda, had become close with Antonio Tony Bananas Capernegro. Sindone, who ran a very large gambling and loan sharking operations in South Philadelphia, seemed to share Capernegro's belief that Bruno was no longer the best fit to run the family. Bruno was not aware of any of this, and he accepted a kiss on the cheek from Sindone as he was leaving Cousin's Little Italy that night. Some of the royal observers believed that Sindone had purposely marked Bruno with the kiss of death. Hours later, Angelo Bruno was shot to death in front of his home. The Godfather was dead. The gangland-style killing became an iconic mob hit. Bruno's mouth had gaped impossibly wide like a screamed death. Angelo Bruno's death would leave a crowd filled with the press members and community members curious over the gruesome death. Here is the footage of law enforcement speaking to Sindone after the brutal killing of Angelo Bruno.
Sergeant Walt Coghlan was sent from the crime scene back to Cuz's restaurant to interview some of Bruno's men.
Sindone was sitting by himself when we walked in to talk to him. And I said, "Frank, what happened?" And he went, "Don't know." I said, "Oh, yeah, I didn't say, we said a few other things that you can't put on television." He said, "I don't know why anybody would want to kill that man. He was a saint." I said, "Well, he is now, if he wasn't before."
Philip Charles Testa, also known as the Chicken Man, will be Angelo Bruno's successor. He, along with Scarfo and other members who would pay tribute to Bruno's memory in a toast, while Scarfo and his nephew, Philip Crazy Phil Leonetti, the Testas, Philip and his son, Salvatore Testa, and the Merlino brothers, Lawrence Yogi Merlino and Salvatore Chucky Merlino, were busy toasting the past, present, and future as Scaniccios. Antonio Capernegro and his crew members were toasting to a very different future at Capernegro's Club in Newark, New Jersey, the Club 311 Club. The toast saw Tony Bananas as the new Don, and the Barracuda, Frank Sindone, as his underboss. When the Genovese Death Squad reported back to Gigante, Vincent the Chin Gigante, Bobby Manna, and the others that Capernegro and Solano were dead, one of them mentioned that they believed Nicky Scarfo was sitting at a bar around the corner with another guy they didn't recognize. Manna immediately ordered the men to go back to the bar and bring the two men to the Genovese clubhouse, as he knew that these men were mistaken. The man at the bar was not Nicky Scarfo. It was John Staffa, the young Sicilian-born mob associate who had driven Angelo Bruno. Returned to the bar moments later, Staffa and Sindone were gone. According to George Anastasia's Blood and Honor, Nick the Crow Caramani said that he was very close with Frank Sindone. He used to go to 11th and Christian Street a lot, where Sindone had a restaurant with Tommy DiGiorno. This would be Cousin's Little Italy, the last restaurant Angelo Bruno attended the night that he was killed. At that time, Tommy Dell was a soldier, but Sindone was. He remarks that he would pass about Angelo Bruno like this guy wants all the money for himself. Sindone, a longtime Bruno family member soldier and was one of the biggest loan sharks in Philadelphia, was to be the underboss in Capernegro's rebel regime. He was a real Barracuda, Caramani says of Sindone. You couldn't trust him at all. Here's also footage from a documentary in which Nick the Crow Caramani talks about Frank Sindone, seen here. Philadelphia police were also watching when John Stanford, the driver of the car in which Angelo Bruno was killed, was visited at the hospital by Frank Sindone and Johnny Keys Simone. Stanfa, a Sicilian immigrant who owned a small construction business in Philadelphia, had sustained minor injuries from flying glass and shotgun pellets. A police officer who spoke in Italian had been posted at the door of Stanfa's hospital room. Sindone and Simone visit Stanfa in the hospital conspiratorially around his bed, speaking in whispers in a Sicilian dialect in which the police could not understand. Stanfa was released from the hospital 2 days after the shooting. 4 days later, he was spotted getting into a car when Sindone and Simone in Philadelphia. They were trailed by the FBI to Newark, New Jersey, where they met with Capernegro. Gotcha. And then I keep hearing, because I don't hear disputes about Antonio Bananas Capernegro being his executioner, because I think Philip Leonetti said that in Mafia Prince, the fall of La Cosa Nostra. But I'm just curious, like, has there ever been like case closes for some of these members, or is always?
I mean, what happened was, I think Capernegro, in fact, he might have even been the shooter that night. Or some people say he was the actual gunman with the shotgun. What happened in the aftermath of the Bruno murder was those guys turned up dead. Capernegro turned up dead. Salerno turned up dead. Frankie Sindone turned up dead. So, you know, the Mafia Commission was carrying out street level justice. You know, killing a boss was a major offense, and there always was a price to pay. And it wasn't, if you think about it, what it was the hierarchy of organized crime looking out for one another and watching their back. You know, you don't want to have a boss killed and the guys that do will walk away, because you may be the next boss that's killed. So there had to be retribution, and that certainly happened quickly in the Bruno assassination. Those guys all turned up dead, with the exception of John Stanfa, who went on the run and later surfaced as
The demise of Angelo Bruno was a success for Capernegro, Salerno, Sindone, and Simone. However, the outcome would not go in their favor. The downfall. March 22nd, 1980. The next day, Simone was reported to visit John Stanfa in the hospital. The hospital staff did not report to what words the men exchanged, since it was in Italian. However, many historians and criminal world observers assumed that Simone warned Stanfa to stay out of sight in case of any relations of the demise of Bruno. A week later, Capernegro sent Simone and Sindone to meet with the commission on his behalf. During the meeting, the commission wanted Capernegro to meet with them in person. Capernegro would assume that he would be crowned to be the new boss of the Philadelphia crime family, and that his supporters were not of any danger. He was wrong. He thought he received permission from the Genovese front boss, Frank Thierry. However, Thierry was not the boss, as Capernegro and the media believed it was. Vincent the Chin Gigante was the real boss. This maneuver was used to confuse law enforcement and any other mafia conspirators. The demise. April 18, 1980. Capernegro and his brother-in-law, Alfred Salerno, would agree to the meeting and would arrive to New York for the meeting. Capernegro was summoned to the basement of a triangular social club in Greenwich Village, Manhattan. In the meeting, there was a panel in a darkly lit room. There was Frank Thierry, Anthony Fat Tony Salerno, Luis Bobby Manna, and Vincent the Chin Gigante inside an empty club. Double-crossed. As Capernegro believed he was going to be crowned the new boss, he looked at Frank Thierry and he met with Vincent the Chin Gigante. Vincent the Chin Gigante had told Capernegro, "We're here to ask who gave you permission to whack out your boss, Angelo Bruno." Capernegro stumbled and was confused. He looked at Frank Thierry, and Thierry had looked at Capernegro very stone-faced. Capernegro had told the Chin, "Funzi told me the permission." Vincent the Chin Gigante's face looked puzzled. He asked Frank, "What is he talking about?" Frank Thierry had stated, "I told you to straighten out, not to kill him." And this is when Capernegro was shocked and knew that this was not looking good for him. He realized that he'd been double-crossed, just like he double-crossed Angelo Bruno, and now he knew his fate was in stake. Therefore, unbeknownst to Capernegro, In the darkly lit room, there were Genovese soldiers ready to take out Capernegro himself, as he knew he pleaded for his life, and unfortunately, this would be the last day Capernegro would see the light of day.
Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe to our channel and check out more of our content. Feel free to give your feedback and suggestions on what we should do next in the comments. This is Infinite Lee Productions. We love ya.